this next chapter is on succulent landscaping. What's my time like? Is there a clock around? What time is it?
10:35.
Okay, because we're going to break a little bit before 11 o'clock. I just wanted to run along. This is a garden in Lucadia by Michael Buckner, who's a very well-known plant guy, succulent guy in San Diego. In the book, I decided I coined the term. This is the 3 R's of succulent landscaping: rocks, repetition, and restraint. So rocks are great, big boulders, rocks, especially here because he had a steep hill to deal with. So I'm sure that's the first thing they did is they dug in and they made sure those rocks would not roll away. So they had tucked it in nicely. But that really fleshed out that slope. And even on a flat space, rocks are good too. How do you big boulders? Not by say rocks, I mean boulders. This is a boulder placement probably by KRC Rock. Then repetition. Instead of putting in a million things, he repeated the blue Senecio serpens, that's a small blue Senecio, the variegated Portulacaria afra, and the green aeoniums. And that way you could really highlight like the golden barrels and the blue trichoceros behind, and they stand out more by having this nice repetition. It almost looks like it could be a natural kind of a thing. And then restraint goes with that, restraint from planting it, overplanting it. And that's the hardest thing for all of us. If you're a plant person, I tell people my house is no example of how you want to do it. I own a nursery, I bring stuff home, I plant stuff, it's way too crowded, but that's just a plant person's house. So it's a balance, but design-wise, you kind of shoot for something like this, and then you can start tucking stuff in over time. This is a house, this is in a gated community in La Costa, and I was just driving by it and took a picture out my window of this yard. What was funny about this project was it was all these little mini mansions, little tract mansions that had the same beautiful, nice blue-gray landscapes. Everything looked really nice and tidy, and then this thing. And I'm sure after this went in, a lot of people went to their CC&Rs and their homeowners to see what they could do about this. I think it's really awesome. I mean, it is a bright garden. It's loud, but it's cool. Those are big variegated things.
What are they?
Well, the plant in front, I didn't know at first. I didn't know if it was a yucca or an agave. It's a yucca. And it's not color guard, and I've forgotten the name right now. It's yucca allifolia, no, yucca filamentosa, some cultivar. What's that?
Something like that, Oreo, isn't it?
No, Oreo would mean yellow, but it actually has its own name. What happened, this is a yucca from the southeast United States. It's green normally, it isn't so spectacular. I read about it in a nursery in England, a yellow one popped up, just a little pop for a sport. And they grew it up, they tissue cultured it, sent it back to the United States, so we have it over here right now. And it's really, I don't have this for sale, I've never acquired one, but it is slowly making it into the market now. I think that's another one up on the top. The one on the right there, that's agave Americana Medio Picta Alba, the white striped agave. Really nice statement plant. They look good in a really big pot or a big urn also. And that is Blue Glow over on the left, which is a little different from that blue one I showed you earlier. The little white things in the corner on the left-hand side, those are Aeonium sunbursts, the same as we saw earlier, doing what they do after time. They're getting a little leggy. That's just part of what they do. Also, they've used a lot of non-succulents in here. And that's an issue on landscaping, too. I like to use, it softens things up to use drought-tolerant things other than succulents. The thing is, a lot of them grow way fast, they swallow stuff. So it's hard to figure out what's going to work with succulents. Make sure big in back, small in front. Don't plant anything in front that's going to swallow your smaller plants. But it's nice to have that flowers and the softening effect. This is the garden right up above Old Town, the bottom of Mission Hills. This is Randy Lowry. He's a local garden designer in San Diego, and he got he has what I've never had as a customer with lots of money and free range. It's a big flat space, and he said, "Just go do it." And so, it's a very busy garden, but it's not so busy because these big pathways kind of give you a soothing effect there. So you can get away with the crazy crowding if you have something like that to calm you down. And those are big agaves of various types, aloes. It's got a little bit of everything in there. Apparently this customer, they travel a lot. They hardly even ever walk down here. This is just his playground, He changed plants out every now and then. He had carte blanche to go to whatever nursery he wanted to and buy whatever he wanted to. Do any of you recognize where this is? Moonlight Beach up in Encinitas. It's right almost on the sand by the volleyball courts. And it's It's a really neat little funky, I don't know how to describe it, stucco house back there, a little Santa Fe style house right above it. And the owner here, this is more of an example of just a plant lover making cuttings and moving them around, just doing their thing, not necessarily buying a lot of new inventory, but reproducing her own aeoniums and agaves and aloes, occasionally adding something new. There's an aloe Hercules in the middle there. And just having fun with plants. And that's wintertime. That garden looks good year-round. It looks really good this time of year because the aeoniums and the aloes, everything's blooming. In fact, if you guys are up in North County the next couple of weeks, right at Moonlight Beach where it ends right by the ocean on Encinitas Boulevard, this is where you check it out. That's an agave tenuola living in the Fort Mill. And this is right across the street from it. This is what happens a lot is the neighbor will say, oh, that's nice, I'm going to do something too. So they jumped on board, and a friend of mine built this nice little lava rock wall on top of their wall with a planter in the middle. And it shows you the second one they can grow right down by the beach. They're nothing like salt water, but these can handle it about as good as anything can. There's a bird flying right behind that one aloe, and that reminds me, I'm working on an aloe and agave book, and I'm looking for a good picture, I haven't caught one yet, of a hummingbird feeding on an aloe. I mentioned that last night at the Hort Society, and several people raised their hands. So if you guys have any good ones you want to email me, if it's good, I'll put it in the book, because I've been trying to catch one, and they're fast, those little buggers. Every time I get my camera out there, they're gone. But if you have aloe, an aloe garden, you have hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love aloes and gasterias. And I like that photo. It's to show you the different colors and contrasts. It's sort of a monochromatic, sort of purple, white look. How cactus and succulents can go together, aeoniums and aloes. It's a little crowded though, isn't it? And another example, real beautiful stuff, material agave, various agaves. That's blue glow in the front, one called dragon toes behind that. Dudleyas up in the top left corner. It's also kind of crowded, isn't it? And the reason it's crowded is that's part of my pickup truck. When I'm either out in the growers buying plants, or if I'm delivering plants for a job, I'll load up my pickup, and I'll take a look at it and go, wow. Right? And it's all this stuff together makes a great shot. So again, camera's always handy. Take a picture.
You really need a good camera just to do that.
That's the next chapter is on echeveria. The echeverias, or echeverias, however you want to pronounce that. This one is called ebony, Agaboides variety ebony. This one's still very rare. There's a greener version that also has a red tip called lipstick that's not as rare. Ebony has this teal, aqua color, and red. I think the ebony comes because that red almost turns black sometimes in the tip. And they don't puff a lot, and it's just there's not a lot out there. And they're a good-sized plant, which is like maybe 10 inches across, it's still like $100 or $200. What happened was a beautiful echeveria book that came out, Echeveria cultivars, came out a couple of years, well, 10 years ago, from a guy in Australia, and the book got up to Korea, and the Koreans went nuts on these things. And they came over here, and they bought up every one that anybody had. In fact, this picture I took in the back of my nursery, and some Koreans that went to another nursery found one of these, came to my nursery looking for some. I didn't have any, but I went out and took a picture of the one he found. So it's not very available yet. They're starting to tissue culture this, so this might come on the market soon. And this is, somebody asked me earlier, when I have a similar one here, if that was Mauna Loa, Echeveria Mauna Loa. That was one of the first frilly hybrids to come along. There have been thousands since. So many that I don't even try to guess names anymore. This is a frilly hybrid is all I call this. It probably has a cultivar name, but I've given up. Ruffles, yeah, ruffle the edges. There's like 20 ruffles. I mean, there's so many of them. This is Afterglow. Have any of you grown Afterglow? Yeah, and it's really, they even grow on the ground okay. It's not as difficult as it looks. It looks like a very dainty plant. But this is in the Cardiff Library Garden in Cardiff, right behind the little town center in Cardiff. This friend of mine, Jeremy Spath, did a really wonderful xerophytic garden. If you're up in Cardiff, go check that out. That's part of his thing there. This is an example of a carunculated echeveria. They look like leprosy on the leaves. And there's a greener form, there's purpler forms. Some people think it's hideous. I think it's really cool. In the eye of the beholder. They will grow up on stems eventually. These echeverias can get kind of tall and they can kind of bend a little bit. You can like that. If you don't like it, you lop the top off and restart the top. And hopefully the stem will pop out with some new growth. This is Echeveria Conte. Another one that's not hard to grow but hard to make more of. It doesn't make pups much at all. So they'd see the tissue culture, they're growing from seed, and a batch will come out, and there'll be a lot available, and then they're all bought up, and then they're gone until the next batch eventually comes out. So it's not very available very often. It's a really pretty plant that gets about maybe 10, 12 inches across. There's another one called subbrigida that's white with gray edges that's like very closely related. Same story. They're available, and then they're not. At the end of the echeveria chapter or interlude, I have a couple pages on dudleyas, which are our only native succulent, really. One of our few native succulents that has any ornamental value. This one is Dudleya Brittani from down in Baja, just south of the border. We have one called pulverulenta that up here that's almost as nice, but Brittani is a little thicker and wider and a better one. And it just shows you they grow right down by the beach. They grow inland too. It's a great plant to grow. They bloom. Those are the flowers coming out, really red stems on those flowers. The agave you see at the bottom, blooming up at the top, that's agave shawi. The Shaw's agave, that's our native agave. And that's a little shot in my yard. I planted some Dudleya Brittani. That's how they grow in nature too. They're usually growing vertically in cracks and rocks. So if you can plant really any plants like that, that's just a good way to display plants if you do mounds and rocks. And that one at the bottom is kind of neat because it has a real truncated leaf, which you don't normally see. That just shows you the variety within plants. I don't know why it did that, but it made it more interesting. It's different. And this is a good landscape one. This one's pretty available because it clusters enough where growers can divide it. Waterwise Botanicals usually has these up in Vista. I try to get it, or they're up in Boston. This might be a Dudleya attenuata or a hybrid, but it's a nice little landscape plant. It's got a nice flower too when it blooms in the springtime. Stays low. Dudleyas being native plants, I mean, you can water them in the summer, but they're one of the ones that you can almost not water. They'll survive on rainwater in a typical year, but they probably would look better with a little bit of summer water. And then this is the thing that I'm going to carry with me to the grave. It'll be on my gravestone. My epitaph is the guy that builds succulent undersea coral reef gardens.
Very cool.
And the first time I did this is the Del Mar Fair in 2002. And for years, my customers have been mentioning that plants like these here, so many of these plants look like undersea creatures. And I agreed, and it's been thought of before. People have actually done these kind of gardens back in the 70s. But for the fair, they like you to have a concept, an idea, something different. So I decided to do an undersea garden. The theme that year was Elvis. And I thought, well, okay, I can't do anything with Elvis. I'm just going to do a coral reef. Yeah, you got the Blue Hawaii movie, but I couldn't really tie that in. So what I did is I over the course of a couple of months, I held back some of these beautiful crests and moundy things, anything that I thought looked underwater-ish. And the more I thought about it, the more things started to look underwatery. And so I really held back a lot of plants. I got some nice lava rock from KRC. I built the thing, and down at the fairgrounds, I started putting it together. And even before I added the fish, I had some other workers down there, and I was saying, hey, it looks like a coral reef. And I thought, oh, good, it's working. And then by the time I added the fish in, it looked like an underwater scene. It came out way better than I thought it would. And I ended up doing it for the Philadelphia Flower Show a couple years after that. And then we did a permanent one at Quail, you'll see it in a minute. This is the kind of garden, not a lot of the plants are real tall, it's mostly smaller than this. And you have an excuse to have an abundant overplanted garden because a coral reef is an overplanted garden. I mean, they're really full of stuff. And you can use props, like I have there's an anchor in the bottom corner, an anchor chain, shells, empty rusty beer cans, whatever would look appropriate in the bottom of the you can use. This was the permanent one we put in at Quail Gardens. San Diego Botanic Garden. This was right after we put it in. It's grown out a lot. It's changed since. Some for the better, some not for the better. This looks a little more refined here than what it's kind of turned into. That plant in the upper middle, that white thing crawling in the rock, everybody loved that. This picture was in San Diego Home and Garden. Well, it was in the Union Tribune and Sunset Magazine. And that's a very rare plant. It's Dickia Marnier La Postelii, and they normally don't even look like that one there. That was a really weird one that we stuck in the rock because it looked so cool.
It survived.
Well, no, it died. It lasted about a year at the most. But everybody came into my shop looking for that plant because they saw it in the magazine, and it's hard to grow and hard to get hold of. I almost wish that shot hadn't run, but I got people. This is, my next chapter is a brief chapter on crassulas and sedums, the soft succulents. This one's usually called crassula baby necklace or watch chain. There's a whole bunch in this complex that look like little things stacked on top of each other. That's a little echeveria peacock eye, I think, next to it. It takes a while to grow them in this density. You normally get a little 4-inch pot. It would take a long time to get that, but that looks cool if you can grow them in that long to have that full of a look. This was the alternative cover on my first version of the book, so I really liked the shot. I actually staged that. I put the agave behind it as the background. That's crassula campfire on the right, and crassula, I call it red pagoda. It's actually a longer Latin name, but it's a cultivar on the left. And it does not always look that good. The plant can turn green, it can stretch out, but at certain times of the year, it's really compact and really red. And I just happened to catch that one when it was looking its best. They're small things, but I just showed you the color. You get it with succulents. These are some examples of Rudy Lime's bonsai succulents. That's the next chapter of the books. I talk about the bonsais. You guys recognize that plant there? That's elephant food, elephant grass. Portugalcaria afra. It's like a jade. It's a really easy plant to grow. And you can bend it in any shape you want. You just get a plunky pot and wire it, bend it, pinch it. It's a very manipulable plant. Technically not really a succulent, but succulent collectors will have the desert rock ficuses, the rock figs. That's Ficus palmeri from Baja. And they grow like that in Baja. They grow like in cracks in the lava rocks. And this is an example of root over rock bonsai. This is done by Julian Duvall, the coordinator of the guy that runs Quail Gardens. The next chapter is on kalanchoes or kalanchoes. That's Kalanchoe luciae, formerly Thrissiflora, the red flapjacks plant. And they don't always get contorted like that. Usually it's more of a flat clamshell thing. You're probably familiar with when they bloom, they stretch into this big 3 or 4 foot high flower, white flower stalk. It looks great, and then it gets brown and ugly. You just cut it off and there's pups coming up. So they go through a morph from looking really cool to looking kind of ugly, but they always end up with more pups after a while. This is another shot of the same plant. I just like that image.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
The little taco shell shape in the middle. They just, plants will do weird things like that. They don't always grow that way, but I like that one. Okay, that plant, that's like a much larger version of one of these guys I brought. I took this one, this is an old slide film. I took this one almost 15 years ago. There's a guy that would come to my nursery. I have a lot of guys with their vans full of plants, wholesale sellers, and I'm buying most of what I would buy from him wholesale-wise would be $3, $5, maybe $15 plants in 1 to 5 gallon pots, regular stuff. And one day he shows up and he has this in the back of his truck. And he takes it out and he looks at me and I say, how much? He says, $200. And I said, okay. And I was kind of sly about it. I paid him his $200, and so I did the retail thing, which you do. I doubled it. I put $400. I put it in the middle of the nursery, and by the next day I'm walking around and going, no. It was just too nice of a plant, so I bumped it to $600. And then I thought, no, somebody will still buy it, so I put it at $1,000. So I really did not want to sell it. That was such, and this was in my first undersea garden at the Del Mar Fair. Right? It was in that picture you saw earlier. So I wanted to use it for that. So I brought it back to the nursery thinking no one would buy it, and somebody did. So it's a rich ranch in Santa Fe guy. I gave him 10% off anyway. And he was not a plant guy. I really worried that this plant just marched off to its death. I don't want to know about it. That was the most perfect of all the crests I've ever acquired. That thing is, there's not a bit of reversion to normal growth. It's blue. There's no spines. It just looks like this big oozing dahlia-esque kind of a thing, isn't it?
Should have kept it.
Yeah, should have kept it. I'm really good about selling stuff out of sight. All day long I'm buying plants, turn around and selling them. Every now and then I take one home. That's one of the couple I probably should have kept. However, I've got one of these at home. This is like a more dwarf form of the same plant. And when these first became available about 5 years ago, this form of it, I took one home, and now it's about this. It's about this big here, and boy, it is unbelievable. So
And how old was that one?
well, it depended. If it was started from something this size, that could take 10 or 15 years. Who knows what? Because they're only growing from cuttings. You don't know what size the cutting was, but that'd have to be 15, 20 years of growing, I would think.
And would that ever revert back, or if it
Well,
doesn't do
it
it?
could. It could revert. I've got some others in the nursery that look just like these, but you see the blue forms coming out of it. You can let them go for a while, but if you sense that energy is going into the reversions, I would cut those off because you want the juice going back into the crest if you can. Yes? That was in like a squat 10-gallon pot.
Oh, jeez.
It was heavy. But the weight was in the plant. It was a hard thing to move. It was a heavy, heavy plant. It's probably about almost 3 feet tall and 1.5 feet across. Just solid water weight. So what this is, by the way,
It's like a statue.
it's normally a blue columnar cactus called Myrtillocactus geometrizans, crested form. And there's multiple crested forms. These are tight, smaller crests. These two crests are slightly different. This one's tight and smaller. This one's about true to what that one is. But it's just, there's a lot of variability with this stuff. That's one of the Medusa euphorbia flanagani in the crested form. Just crested into a nice little rice smile. I thought that was a good picture of.
That's lovely. Whatever. Very smart.
This is a plant that's normally a Pensila euphorbia looking plant. It's called Petalanthrus macrocarpa from Baja. It's a good landscape plant in the normal form, but when this one crest, this particular variety was a spiral, contorting spiral crest. And one of my customers, when she saw this in my shop, she named it the extrusion, which I thought was a good name because it looks like Play-Doh that's been extruded out of a Play-Doh extruder. And same deal. I got this from another guy. That was from Collector Joe you saw earlier, and it came off the truck. This one did go home with me. I had the right pot for it. It needed a pot where it could cascade down. The problem was I left it in the more shady area for a long time, and I moved it out to the sun, and it was a really hot day. And even though succulents love sun, if you take them out from indoors to outdoors too quick, especially the winter sun or the fall sun comes in at an angle, it's worse than the summer sun, and it burned it really good. So I lost most of the growth off that thing. The main plant lived, but it's taken forever to come back. So and I haven't been able to even cut it at all. I occasionally get one from Joe like this, so it's just not very available. Can anyone guess what that is? If it's even a plant? This is a crested peyote plant. This is Lophoceros williamsi, crested form.
We're not supposed to have those.
I know, we're not supposed to have those. I'm not telling you where I took that picture.
You can grab corn for a master gardener to have one of those.
That's right. You know, I hear different stories about whether it's legal to own them. I think I cannot sell them. Believe me, a plant like that, I'm not going to eat that thing. That thing is awesome. I mean, again, it's an example of a plant taking its own psychedelic drugs and turning it into a free plant. I get people into the nursery that they want one of these things. They're talking about the saguaro cactuses, the cartoon cactuses. And saguaros, maybe you can keep them alive here, but they're never going to grow big enough to actually get arms. You'd have to go buy a $10,000 one in Tucson and import it here. It might grow in Poway, but it might not grow in the coast. I wouldn't even try it. So we can grow cardone cactuses, which are kind of like this, but they don't really branch. So if you want a branching thing, this is the euphorbia, not a cactus, euphorbia ingens or ingens. There's other forms, there's amic and abyssinica. There's a couple different euphorbias. They grow really fast. I've got a bunch of them in my shop that I showed you in one of the first slides. They just root themselves out of their pot and they become these giant trees. And this one did that. It rooted itself out of this box and became this 20 foot tall, 20 foot across. That's the seed pods. After the flowers are small, the seed pods are actually bigger than the flowers. And this one, a couple years after I took this photo, see this little branch kind of falling over right here? They get so top heavy with the seed pods, sometimes the branches will break off. And this whole plant went over on me this last winter.
Aww.
But I'm a nursery owner, I cut it up, and now I have more plants to sell. The one aloe blooming below it? That's the exact same aloe ferox that we saw in that first aloe slide with the little orange flowers. That's the same plant, the bigger flowers. Now I have a chapter on variegation. Lots of plants go variegate. Succulents and cactus more spectacularly than a lot of plants. The story in this one was I took this as a slide film from about 20 years ago at one of my customers' houses. Didn't know what it was at the time. I converted it to digital. I showed it to a friend of mine, and these people on eBay, they're crazy about trading, selling unusual, variegated, rare things. He told me, boy, for a 4-inch one, I could get like $500 on eBay for that plant. Can you get me one? And I said, well, I don't know. I can go back to this guy's house. I went back there. He said, I don't remember that plant, but I don't have it anymore. It must have bloomed and died like agaves do. And I never figured out what it is yet. That's called Mediopicta variegation with the yellow stripe in the middle. It looks a little like agave lophantha. It looks a little bit like agave Bologna. I just don't know which one it is. But if any of you ever see this, please go to eBay and sell it. But I'd like for a shot at it.
Joe Clemens would know.
What's that?
Joe Clemens?
He might know, yeah.
He would know.
Yeah.
It looks almost like the quadricolor.
It does. Well, yeah, quadricolor is a lophantha. And it might be lophantha, but not in the quadricolor type variegation. So I wish I knew. This slide, when I was practicing a slideshow in the old Bell and Howell years ago, I was doing it in the dark room, showing up it was really pretty in a dark room, and showed up on the wall. My kids were little at the time, they took their shirts off and ran in front of it. They looked like lizard men running around. I'll never get the image out of my head of them standing in front of this picture looking at themselves all looking like alien creatures. That is a conophytum, which is one of the many types of African ice plant related NSMs. They bloom beautifully usually in the fall. That's an example probably of snail damage right there. And you're going to get snail damage, you're going to get bug damage in succulents like anything else, and you just live with it. Plants live with it, so it's part of life. You can try to kill all your snails, or you can just realize that happens sometimes. Closely related to this are lithops. How many of you know what a lithop is? How many of you have killed a lithop? All the hands are still up. Lithops are difficult plants to grow. They're the little living stones. And they're very sensitive to overwatering. You have to, one guy said he watered twice a year. I don't think that's enough, but it kind of gives you the idea. You don't water them much. I've read that you can give them a little water in the spring and the fall, but almost none in the summer and none in the winter. They're just difficult. Conophytums are related, but they're a little bit easier. There's a large form called the split rock that looks like a giant lithop. That's a lot easier. Baby toes. I have an example of baby toes here. Yeah, this is a related plant called baby toes. We'll talk about it in a little bit. This is a little bit easier, but some of them are just, even though they're succulents, they're kind of difficult. Any guesses on what that is? Yeah, bromeliad family, you got that right. It's not a succulent, but succulent collectors will collect a lot of bromeliads because the care is very similar on tillandsias and bromeliads. This is it's a type of bromeliad. The name used to be called a bromatiela. It's now called Deuteroconia. It's called Deuteroconia brevifolia. Do you see that on the left-hand side? Do you see that little flat with the little ones? I guarantee you, in the middle of this blob, there's a little black plastic flat. And so this thing just decided to outgrow its flat. It swallowed its flat just like a blob. It just swallowed that whole corner of that table. And it's never leaving. And if you wanted to get it out of there, you'd have to cut the table off and take the wood with you. So that shows you the persistence of wanting to live that some of these plants have. It's a really nice plant. I mean, in the small one in the pot, they're really cool. Just tight little, they're sharp. Tight little things. They're wonderful plants. This is an example of vertical gardening. I do a little chapter towards the end of the book on vertical gardens. They're really cool. They look great. We talked about it earlier. I try to talk people out of it unless they really have a lot of time and money on their hands, because they're just hard to maintain. They're hard to keep looking good. I've been told there's a place down in Bakersville, a restaurant that has really good vertical gardens, and I guess they have people there 3 times a week to take care of it. That's kind of what you need, and you need to keep replacing plants and cutting plants. If you're into that, if you love that part of the thing, do it. But for most people that just think it would be fun to do, I just warn them first. This one, Barbara Baker in Rancho Santa Fe, a really nice lady. She built that, and it looked great, and I went back to her house like 6 months later, and it was already just history.
Roger Moore, live and let die project.
Yeah, exactly. Live and let die project. That's a good way to put it. Yes.
So I'm sorry to say I have one of those, and I'm doing what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is it soaking it? Is that the answer?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, because they dry out really fast, and you can't just spray with a hose and really get it. So you have to either take it down and water it, and leave it down for a day and put it back up, or people will get little water tubes to go down and work. It just takes that kind of effort to really make them, because even though they're succulents, most succulents are from summer water places, and most of them do like summer water, and they look better if you water them in the summer. They love warm weather water. Okay, so this, for some reason, I don't know why I put this here, but we're back to my book a little bit there. So a lot of you bought this before, and I still have some for sale afterwards. That shows you a little bit how the designer kind of helped me refine my pages a little bit and make it look a little bit more booky. I have had a few complaints that the font, the type is a little small, but you all are wearing reading glasses anyways, right? So I don't know why people are complaining about that. I have to wear reading glasses one of these, so who cares if the font is small? This is the next book I'm working on, which is Aloes and Agaves. What my plan is, because only doing 10 pages on aloes in this book was so hard, I have hundreds of aloe pictures, and I'm an aloe collector. So my hope is, and it's looking good so far, if I sell enough of this book, I can fund my next book, which is on aloes and agaves. And what I really want to do is flesh out all of the interludes and even the chapters into their own books, because that kind of gives me, I know how to build books now. This is my hobby. I'm having fun with it. So this one, if we have a little bit of time after the presentation, I might show you, I can give you a little teaser, because I have this with 90% built on the computer. I just have to get it converted now. I built it on Blurb, did the same thing. That's how I do it now. By the way, I got to recommend to all of you, a lot of plant people here, a lot of photographers, if you have a thing, that you want to make at least just a book for yourself, download that blurb/Booksmart is what they call it, and figure out how to do it. Drag your photos over there, and it's a fun thing to do.
One's for our house.
Remember that little coal spell we had, that little freezing thing on New Year's? This is from my friend Brent, who lives up in Wildemar by Lake Elsinore. And you probably saw in the news, they got snow up there. I mean, right on the freeway, it was snow. It was like Big Bear. And his aloe collection got, yes? Yeah, what time is it right now? Oh, it's 11:05? I got like 3 slides left, so we're going to take a break. 1 sec.
Is that Beansia?
Yeah, that's a Tongaensis, which is the dwarf Beansia.
Whoa!
Yeah,
how
it
tall is that?
got snowed on good. That's up in the Lake Elsinore area. This is aloe David Verity. And it survived. He said everything came out of the snow fine. Snow is a lot more forgiving than a hard, clear frost. And but I'm thinking about this might be my Christmas card next year. I think that's a cool picture. This is Jerry Hunter's ranch, the guy that he passed away that owned Ranch of Soledad Nursery. I want to get out there and take some pictures this week. I'm going to try to get out there. This is from last year. A friend of mine sent me this. This is aloe ferox in bloom. That looks to me like something out of the movie Avatar. That's his place too. That looks surreal. I mean, those are all aloe marlopias in bloom with cycads and big rock backgrounds. That looks like a botanic garden, but that's a private garden.
Wow.
And lastly, that's an agave potatorum. That's just one of my favorite pictures I've taken. I just happened to get lucky on that plant. The imprinting on the plant, the way the light was hitting it. And believe me, I just walked up and took a picture. I didn't stage this. It just was there, and I took a picture. So